This is the original Pooh country. Christopher Robin actually lived somewhere down there. And this is where Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, Eeyore, Owl, Rabbit, and all the rest of them lived and roamed. Nobody seemed to know where they came from. But there they were, in the forest, Kanga and Baby Roo. When Pooh asked Christopher Robin, "How did they come here?" Christopher Robin said, "In the usual way, if you know what I mean, Pooh." And Pooh, who didn't, said, "Oh." Then he nodded his head twice and said, "In the usual way." "Ah." Then he went to call upon his friend Piglet to see what he thought about it. And at Piglet's house he found Rabbit. So they all talked about it together. "What I don't like about it is this," said Rabbit. "Here are we, you, Piglet, and me, and suddenly..." "And Eeyore," said Pooh. "And Eeyore, and then suddenly..." "And Owl," said Pooh. "And Owl, and then all of a sudden..." "Oh, and Eeyore," said Pooh. "I was forgetting him." "Here we are," said Rabbit, very slowly and carefully, "all of us. And then suddenly we wake up one morning, and what do we find? We find a strange animal among us. An animal of whom we have never even heard before. An animal who carries her family about with her in her pocket. Suppose I carried my family about with me in my pocket. How many pockets should I want?" 16, said Piglet. 17, isn't it? Said Rabbit. "And one more for a handkerchief? That's 18. 18 pockets in one suit. I haven't time." There was a long and thoughtful silence. And then Pooh, who'd been frowning very hard for some minutes, said, "I make it 15. "What?" said Rabbit. 15. 15 what? "Your family." "What about them?" Pooh rubbed his nose and said he thought Rabbit had been talking about his family. "Did I?" said Rabbit carelessly. "Yes, you said..." "Never mind, Pooh," said Piglet impatiently. "The question is, what are we to do about Kanga?" "Oh, I see," said Pooh. "The best way," said Rabbit, "would be this. The best way would be to steal Baby Roo and hide him. And then, when Kanga says, 'Where's Baby Roo?' we say, 'Aha!'" "Aha," said Pooh, practicing. "Aha! Aha! Of course," he went on, "we could say, 'Aha,' even if we hadn't stolen Baby Roo." "Pooh," said Rabbit kindly, "you haven't any brain." "I know," said Pooh humbly. "We say 'Aha' so that Kanga knows that we know where Baby Roo is. Aha means, we'll tell you where Baby Roo is if you promise to go away from the forest and never come back. Now don't talk while I think." Pooh went into a corner and tried saying, "Aha," in that sort of voice. Sometimes it seemed to him that it did mean what Rabbit said, and sometimes it seemed to him that it didn't. "I suppose it's just practice," he thought. "I wonder if Kanga will have to practice too, so as to understand it." "There's just one thing," said Piglet, fidgeting a bit. "I was talking to Christopher Robin, and he said that a Kanga was generally regarded as one of the fiercer animals. I am not frightened of fierce animals in the ordinary way, but it is well known that if one of the fiercer animals is deprived of its young, it becomes as fierce as two of the fiercer animals. In which case, aha is perhaps a foolish thing to say." "Piglet," said Rabbit, taking out a pencil and licking the end of it, "you haven't any pluck." "Now listen, all of you," said Rabbit, when he had finished writing, and Pooh and Piglet sat listening very eagerly with their mouths open. This is what Rabbit read out. "Plan to capture Baby Roo. 1. General remarks. Kanga runs faster than any of us, even me. 2. More general remarks. Kanga never takes her eyes off Baby Roo, except when he's safely buttoned up in her pocket. 3. Therefore, if we are to capture Baby Roo, we must get a long start, because Kanga runs faster than any of us, even me. See number 1. 4. A thought. If Roo had jumped out of Kanga's pocket and Piglet had jumped in, Kanga wouldn't know the difference because Piglet is a very small animal. 5. Like Roo. 6. But Kanga would have to be looking the other way first so as not to see Piglet jumping in. 7. See number 2. Kanga never takes her eyes off Baby Roo except when he's safely buttoned up in her pocket. 8. Another thought. But if Pooh was talking to her very excitedly, she might look the other way for a moment. 9. And then I could run away with Roo. 10 quickly. 11, and Kanga wouldn't discover the difference until afterwards. Well, Rabbit read this out proudly, and for a little while after he had read it, nobody said anything. And then Piglet, who'd been opening and shutting his mouth without making any noise, managed to say very huskily, "And afterwards? How do you mean?" "When Kanga does discover the difference." "Then we all say, aha!" "All three of us?" "Yes." "Oh. Why, what's the trouble, Piglet?" "Nothing," said Piglet. "As long as we all three say it." "As long as we all three say it," said Piglet. "I don't mind," he said, "but I shouldn't care to say aha by myself. It wouldn't sound nearly so well. By the way," he said, "you aren't quite sure about what you said about the winter months." "The winter months?" "Yes, only being fierce in the winter months." "Oh, yes, that's all right. Well, Pooh, you see what you have to do." "No," said Pooh Bear. "Not yet," he said. "What do I do?" "Well, you just have to talk very hard to Kanga so she doesn't notice anything." "Oh, what about?" "Anything you like." "You mean like telling her a little bit of poetry or something?" "That's it," said Rabbit. "Splendid. Now come along." So they all went out to look for Kanga. Kanga and Roo were spending a quiet afternoon in a sandy part of the forest. Baby Roo was practicing very small jumps in the sand and falling down mouse holes and climbing out of them, and Kanga was fidgeting about and saying, "Just one more jump, dear, and then we must go home." And at that moment, who should come stumping up the hill but Pooh. "Good afternoon, Kanga." "Good afternoon, Pooh." "Look at me jumping," squeaked Roo and fell into another mouse hole. "Hello, Roo, my little fellow." "We were just going home," said Kanga. "Good afternoon, Rabbit. Good afternoon, Piglet." Rabbit and Piglet had now come up from the other side of the hill. "Oh, Kanga," said Pooh, after Rabbit had winked at him twice. "I don't know if you're interested in poetry at all." "Hardly at all," said Kanga. "Oh," said Pooh. "Go on," said Rabbit in a loud whisper. "Talking of poetry," said Pooh, "I made up a little piece as I was coming along. It went like this. Let me see. Fancy," said Kanga. "Now, Roo, dear." "How did it go, Pooh?" said Rabbit. Pooh gave a little cough and began. "Lines written by a bear of very little brain. On Monday, when the sun is hot, I wonder to myself a lot, now is it true or is it not, that what is which and which is what? On Tuesday, when it hails and snows, the feeling on me grows and grows, and hardly anybody knows if those are these or these are those. On Wednesday, when the sky is blue, and I have nothing else to do, I sometimes wonder if it's true that who is what and what is who. On Thursday, when it starts to freeze, and hoarfrost twinkles on the trees, how very readily one sees that these are whose. But whose are these? On Friday, yes, it is, isn't it?" said Kanga, not waiting to hear what happened on Friday. "Just one more jump, Roo, dear, and then we really must be going." Rabbit gave Pooh a hurrying up sort of nudge. "Talking of poetry," said Pooh quickly, "have you ever noticed that tree right over there?" "You ought to look at that tree right over there," said Rabbit. I can see a bird in it from here," said Pooh. "Or is it a fish?" "You ought to see that bird from here," said Rabbit, "unless it's a fish." And then Kanga did turn her head to look. And the moment that her head was turned, Rabbit said in a loud voice, "In you go, Roo!" And in jumped Piglet into Kanga's pocket, and off scampered Rabbit with Roo in his paws as fast as he could. "Why, where's Rabbit?" said Kanga, turning round again. "Are you all right, Roo, dear?" Piglet made a squeaky Roo noise from the bottom of Kanga's pocket. "Rabbit had to go away," said Pooh. "I think he thought of something he had to go and see about suddenly." "And Piglet?" "I think Piglet thought of something at the same time, suddenly." "Well, we must be getting home," said Kanga. "Goodbye, Pooh." And in 3 large jumps she was gone. Pooh looked after her as she went. "Oh, I wish I could jump like that," he thought. "Some can, some can't. That's how it is." But there were moments when Piglet wished that Kanga couldn't. Often when he had had a long walk home through the forest, he'd wished that he were a bird. But now he thought jerkily to himself at the bottom of Kanga's pocket, "If this is flying, I shall never really take to it." And as he went up in the air, he said, "Oh!" And as he came down, he said, "Ow!" And as he was saying, "Ooh, ow! Ooh, ow! Ooh, ow!" all the way to Kanga's house. Of course, as soon as Kanga unbuttoned her pocket, she saw what had happened. Just for a moment, she thought she was frightened, and then she knew she wasn't, for she felt sure that Christopher Robin would never let any harm happen to Roo. So she said to herself, if they are having a joke with me, I will have a joke with them. Now then, Roo dear, she said as she took Piglet out of her pocket. Bedtime! Aha, said Piglet, as well as he could after his terrifying journey. But it wasn't a very good aha, and Kanga didn't seem to understand what it meant. Bath first, said Kanga in a cheerful voice. Ha-ha, said Piglet again, looking around anxiously for the others. But the others weren't there. Rabbit was playing with baby Roo in his own house and feeling more fond of him every minute. And Pooh, who had decided to be a Kanga, was still at the sandy place on the top of the forest, practicing jumps. I'm not at all sure, said Kanga in a thoughtful voice, that it wouldn't be a good idea to have a cold bath this evening. Would you like that, Roo dear? Piglet, who had never been really fond of baths, shuddered a long, indignant shudder and said in as brave a voice as he could, Kanga, I see that the time has come to speak plainly. Funny little Roo, said Kanga as she got the bath water ready. I am not Roo, said Piglet loudly. I am Piglet. Yes, dear, yes, said Kanga soothingly, and imitating Piglet's voice too. So clever of him, she went on, as she took a large bar of yellow soap out of the cupboard. What will he be doing next? Can't you see, shouted Piglet. Haven't you got eyes? Look at me. I am looking, Roo dear, said Kanga rather severely. And you know what I told you yesterday about making faces? If you go on making faces like Piglet's, you'll grow up to look like Piglet and then think how sorry you will be. Now then, into the bath and don't let me have to speak to you about it again. Before he knew where he was, Piglet was in the bath, and Kanga was scrubbing him firmly with a large, lathery flannel. You did it on purpose, spluttered Piglet as soon as he could speak, and then accidentally had another mouthful of lathery flannel. That's right, dear, don't say anything, said Kanga. And in another minute, Piglet was out of the bath and being rubbed dry with a towel. Now, said Kanga, there's your medicine and then bed. Oh, medicine, said Piglet. To make you grow big and strong, dear. You don't want to grow up small and weak like Piglet, do you? Well, then. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Come in, said Kanga, and in came Christopher Robin. Christopher Robin, cried Piglet. Tell Kanga who I am. She keeps saying I'm Roo. I'm not Roo, am I? Christopher Robin looked at him very carefully and shook his head. You can't be Roo, he said, because I've just seen Roo playing in Rabbit's house. Well, said Kanga, fancy that. Fancy my making a mistake like that. There you are, said Piglet. I told you so. I'm Piglet. Christopher Robin shook his head again. Oh, you're not Piglet, he said. I know Piglet well, and he's quite a different colour. Piglet began to say that this was because he had just had a bath, and then he thought that perhaps he wouldn't say that. And as he opened his mouth to say something else, Kanga slipped the medicine spoon in and then patted him on the back and told him that it was really quite a nice taste when he got used to it. I knew it wasn't Piglet, said Kanga. I wonder who it can be. Perhaps it's some relation of Pooh's, said Christopher Robin. What about a nephew or an uncle or something? Kanga agreed that this was probably what it was, and said that they would have to call it by some name. I shall call it Pootle, said Christopher Robin. Henry Pootle for short. And just when it was decided, Henry Pootle wriggled out of Kanga's arms and jumped to the ground. To his great joy, Christopher Robin had left the door open. Never had Henry Pootle Piglet run so fast as he ran then, and he didn't stop running until he got quite close to his house. But when he was 100 yards away, he stopped running and rolled the rest of the way home so as to get his own nice, comfortable colour again. So Kanga and Roo stayed in the forest, and every Tuesday Roo spent the day with his great friend Rabbit, and every Tuesday Kanga spent the day with her great friend Pooh, teaching him to jump, and every Tuesday Piglet spent the day with his great friend Christopher Robin. So they were all happy again. By the time it came to the edge of the forest, the stream had grown up, so that it was almost a river. And being grown up, it didn't run and jump and sparkle along as it used to do when it was younger, but moved more slowly. For it knew now where it was going, and it said to itself, there's no hurry. We shall get there someday. There was a broad track leading from the outland to the forest, but before it could come to the forest, it had to cross this river. So where it crossed, there was this wooden bridge with wooden rails on each side of it. Christopher Robin could get his chin onto the top rail if he wanted to, But it was more fun to stand on the bottom rail so he could lean right over and watch the river slipping slowly away beneath him. Pooh could get his chin onto the bottom rail if he wanted to, but it was more fun to lie down and get his head under it and watch the river slipping slowly away beneath him. And this was the only way in which Piglet and Roo could watch the river at all, because they were too small to reach the bottom rail. So they would lie down and watch it, and it slipped away very slowly, being in no hurry to get there. One day, when Pooh was walking towards this bridge, he was trying to make up a piece of poetry about fir cones, because there they were, lying about on each side of him, and he felt singy. So he picked a fir cone up and looked at it and said to himself, "This is a very good fir cone, and something ought to rhyme to it." But he couldn't think of anything. And then this came into his head suddenly. Here is a mystery about a little fir tree. Owl says it's his tree, and Kanga says it's her tree. Which doesn't make sense, said Pooh, because Kanga doesn't live in a tree. He had just come to the bridge, and not looking where he was going, he tripped over something, and the fir cone jerked out of his paw into the river. "Bother," said Pooh, as it floated slowly under the bridge. And he went back to get another fir cone which had a rhyme to it. But then he thought that he would just look at the river instead, because it was a peaceful sort of day. So he lay down and looked at it, and it slipped slowly away beneath him. And suddenly, there was his fir cone slipping away too. "That's funny," said Pooh. "I dropped it on the other side," said Pooh, "and it came out on this side. I wonder if it would do it again." And he went back for some more fir cones. It did. It kept on doing it. Then he dropped two in at once and leant over the bridge to see which of them would come out first. And one of them did. But as they were both the same size, he didn't know if it was the one which he wanted to win or the other one. So the next time, he dropped one big one and one little one. And the big one came out first, which is what he had said it would do, and the little one came out last, which is what he had said it would be. So he'd won twice. And when he went home for tea, he had won 36 and lost 28, which meant that he had, well, you take 28 from 36. And that's what he was, instead of the other way round. And that was the beginning of the game called Pooh Sticks, which Pooh invented and which he and his friends used to play on the edge of the forest. But they played with sticks instead of fir cones because they were easier to mark. Now one day, Pooh and Piglet and Rabbit and Roo were all playing Pooh Sticks together. They had dropped their sticks in when Rabbit said, "Go!" And then they had hurried across to the other side of the bridge, and now they were all leaning over the edge, waiting to see whose stick would come out first. But it was a long time coming, because the river was very lazy that day and hardly seemed to mind if it didn't ever get there at all.
"I can see mine,"
cried Roo.
"No, I can't. It's something else. Can you see yours, Piglet?" "I thought I could see mine, but I couldn't." "There it is. No, it isn't. Can you see yours, Pooh?"
"No," said Pooh.
"I expect my stick's stuck," said Roo. "Rabbit, my stick's stuck. Is your stick stuck, Piglet?"
"They always take longer than you think," said Rabbit.
"How long do you think they'll take?"
asked Roo. "I can see yours, Piglet," said Pooh suddenly.
"Mine's a sort of greyish one,"
said Piglet, not daring to lean too far over in case he fell in. "Yes, that's what I can see. It's coming on to my side." Rabbit leant further over than ever, looking for his, and Roo wriggled up and down, calling out,
"Come on, stick! 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 Stick!"
And Piglet got very excited, because his was the only one which had been seen, and that meant that he was winning. "It's coming," said Pooh.
"Are you sure it's mine?"
squeaked Piglet excitedly. "Yes, because it's grey. A big grey one. Here it comes. A very big grey... Oh, no, it isn't. It's Eeyore." And out floated Eeyore. "Eeyore!" cried everybody. Looking very calm, very dignified, with his legs in the air, came Eeyore from beneath the bridge.
"It's Eeyore!"
cried Roo, terribly excited. "Is that so?" said Eeyore, getting caught up by a little eddy and turning slowly round 3 times. "I wondered."
"I didn't know you were playing,"
said Roo. "I'm not," said Eeyore.
"Eeyore, what are you doing there?" said Rabbit.
"I'll give you 3 guesses, Rabbit. Digging holes in the ground, wrong. Leaping from branch to branch of a young oak tree, wrong. waiting for somebody to help me out of the river? Right. Give Rabbit time and he'll always get the answer. But Eeyore, said Pooh in distress, what can we, how shall we, do you think if we... Yes, said Eeyore, one of those would be just the thing. Thank you, Pooh.
He's going round and round,
said Roo, much impressed. And why not? Said Eeyore coldly.
I can swim too,
said Roo proudly. Not round and round, said Eeyore. It's much more difficult. I didn't want to come swimming at all today, he went on, revolving slowly. But if, when in, I decide to practice a slight circular movement from right to left, or perhaps I should say, he added, as he got into another eddy, from left to right, just as it happens to occur to me, it is nobody's business but my own. There was a moment's silence while everybody thought. I've got a sort of idea, said Pooh at last, but I don't suppose it's a very good one. I don't suppose it is either, said Eeyore.
Go on, Pooh, said Rabbit. Let's have it.
Well, if we all threw stones and things into the river on one side of Eeyore, the stones would make waves, and the waves would wash him to the other side.
That's a very good idea, said Rabbit.
And Pooh looked happy again. Very, said Eeyore. When I want to be washed, Pooh, I'll let you know.
Supposing we hit him by mistake,
said Piglet anxiously. Or supposing you missed him by mistake, said Eeyore. Think of all the possibilities, Piglet, before you settle down to enjoy yourselves. But Pooh had got the biggest stone he could carry and was leaning over the bridge, holding it in his paws. I'm not throwing it. I'm dropping it, Eeyore, he explained. And then I can't miss. I can't hit you. Could you stop turning round for a moment? Because it muddles me rather. No, said Eeyore. I like turning round. Rabbit began to feel that it was time he took command.
Now, Pooh, he said, when I say now, you can drop it. Eeyore, when I say now, Pooh will drop his stone.
Thank you very much, Rabbit, but I expect I shall know.
Are you ready, Pooh? Piglet, give Pooh a little more room. Get back there, Roo. Are you ready?
No, said Eeyore.
No, said Rabbit.
Pooh dropped his stone. There was a loud splash and Eeyore disappeared. It was an anxious moment for the watchers on the bridge. They looked and looked, and even the sight of Piglet's stick coming out a little in front of Rabbit's didn't cheer them up as much as you would have expected. And then, just as Pooh was beginning to think that he must have chosen the wrong stone, or the wrong river, or the wrong day for his idea, something grey showed for a moment by the riverbank, and it got slowly bigger and bigger. And at last it was Eeyore coming out. With a shout, they rushed off the bridge and pushed and pulled at him, and soon he was standing among them again on dry land.
Oh, Eeyore, you are wet,
said Piglet, feeling him. Eeyore shook himself and asked somebody to explain to Piglet what happened when you'd been inside a river for quite a long time.
How did you fall in, Eeyore? Asked Rabbit,
as he dried him with Piglet's handkerchief. I didn't, said Eeyore.
But how?
I was bounced, said Eeyore.
Who?
Said Roo excitedly.
Did somebody push you?
Somebody bounced me. I was just thinking by the side of the river, thinking, if any of you know what that means, when I received a loud bounce.
Oh, Eeyore, said everybody. Are you sure you didn't slip? Asked Rabbit wisely.
Of course I slipped. If you're standing on the slippery bank of a river and somebody bounces you loudly from behind, you slip. What did you think I did?
But who did it?
Asked Roo. Eeyore didn't answer.
I expect it was Tigger,
said Piglet nervously. But Eeyore, said Pooh, was it a joke or an accident? I didn't stop to ask, Pooh. Even at the very bottom of the river, I didn't stop to say to myself, is this a hearty joke or is it the merest accident? I just floated to the surface and said to myself, it's wet, if you know what I mean.
And where was Tigger? Asked Rabbit.
Before Eeyore could answer, there was a loud noise behind them, and through the hedge came Tigger himself. Hello, everybody, said Tigger cheerfully.
Hello, Tigger,
said Roo. Rabbit became very important suddenly.
Tigger, he said solemnly,
what happened just now? Just when? Said Tigger, a little uncomfortably. When you bounced Eeyore into the river. I didn't bounce him. You bounced me, said Eeyore gruffly. I didn't really. I had a cough, and I happened to be behind Eeyore, and I said, grrr, hoopsa. Why? Said Rabbit, helping Piglet up and dusting him. It's all right, Piglet. It took me by surprise, said Piglet nervously. That's what I call bouncing, said Eeyore. Taking people by surprise. A very unpleasant habit. I don't mind Tigger being in the forest, he went on, because it's a large forest, and there's plenty of room to bounce in it. But I don't see why he should come into my little corner of it and bounce there. It isn't as if there was anything wonderful about my little corner. Of course, for people who like cold, wet, ugly bits, it is something rather special. But otherwise, it's just a corner. And if anybody feels bouncy, I didn't bounce, I coughed, said Tigger crossly. Bouncy or coffee, all I can say is, well, here's Christopher Robin, so he can say it. Christopher Robin ran down from the forest to the bridge, feeling all sunny and careless, and just as if twice 19 didn't matter a bit, as it didn't on such a happy afternoon. And he thought that if he stood on the bottom rail of the bridge and leant over and watched the river slipping slowly away beneath him, he would suddenly know everything that there was to be known, and he would be able to tell Pooh, who wasn't quite sure about some of it. But when he got to the bridge and saw all the animals there, then he knew that it wasn't that kind of afternoon, but the other kind, when you wanted to do something. It's like this, Christopher Robin, began Rabbit. Tigger? No, I didn't, said Tigger. Well, anyhow, there I was, said Eeyore. But I don't think he meant to, said Pooh. He just is bouncy, said Piglet, and he can't help it. Try bouncing me, Tigger, said Roo eagerly. Eeyore, Tigger's going to try me. Piglet, do you think? Yes, yes, said Rabbit. We don't all want to speak at once. The point is, what does Christopher Robin think about it? All I did was I coughed, said Tigger. He bounced, said Eeyore. Well, I sort of boffed, said Tigger. Hush, said Rabbit, holding up his paw. What does Christopher Robin think about it all? That's the point. Well, said Christopher Robin, not quite sure what it was all about. I think, yes, said everybody. I think we ought to play Pooh Sticks. So they did. And Eeyore, who had never played before, won more times than anybody else. And Roo fell in twice, the first time by accident, and the second time on purpose, because he suddenly saw Kanga coming from the forest, and he knew he'd have to go to bed anyhow. So when Rabbit said he'd go with them, and Tigger and Eeyore went off together because Eeyore wanted to tell Tigger how to win at Pooh Sticks, which you do by letting your stick drop in a twitchy sort of way, if you understand what I mean, Tigger. And Christopher Robin and Pooh and Piglet were left on the bridge by themselves. For a long time they looked at the river beneath them, saying nothing. And the river said nothing too, for it felt very quiet and peaceful on this summer afternoon. Tigger is all right, really, said Piglet lazily. Of course he is, said Christopher Robin. Everybody is, really, said Pooh. That's what I think, said Pooh. But I don't suppose I'm right, he said. Of course you are, said Christopher Robin. It was going to be one of Rabbit's busy days. As soon as he woke up, he felt important, as if everything depended upon him. It was just a day for organising something, or for writing a notice signed Rabbit, or for seeing what everybody else thought about it. It was a perfect morning for hurrying round to Pooh and saying, very well then, I'll tell Piglet. And then going to Piglet and saying, Pooh thinks, but perhaps I'd better see Owl first. It was a captainish sort of day, when everybody said yes, Rabbit, and no, Rabbit, and waited until he had told them. He came out of his house and sniffed the warm spring morning as he wondered what he would do. After all, said Rabbit to himself, Christopher Robin depends on me. He's fond of Pooh and Piglet and Eeyore, and so am I. But they haven't any brain. Not to notice. And he respects Owl because you can't help respecting anybody who can spell Tuesday, even if he doesn't spell it right. But spelling isn't everything. There are days when spelling Tuesday simply doesn't count. And Kanga is too busy looking after Roo, and Roo is too young, and Tigger too bouncy to be of any help. So there's really nobody but me when you come to look at it. I'll go and see if there's anything he wants doing, and then I'll do it for him. It's just the day for doing things. Rabbit hurried on to the edge of the 100-acre wood, feeling more important every minute, and soon he came to the tree where Christopher Robin lived. He knocked at the door, and he called out once or twice, then he walked back a little way and put his paw up to keep the sun out, and called to the top of the tree. And then he turned all round and shouted, "Hello!" And I say, and "It's Rabbit!" But nothing happened. Then he stopped and listened, and everything stopped and listened with him, and the forest was very lone and still and peaceful in the sunshine, until suddenly, 100 miles above him, a lark began to sing. "Bother," said Rabbit. "He's gone out." He went back to the green front door just to make sure, and he was turning away, feeling that his morning had got all spoilt, when he saw a piece of paper on the ground, and there was a pin in it, as if it had fallen off the door. "Ah," said Rabbit, feeling quite happy again. "Another notice, which said, 'Gone out, Baxon, busy, Baxon, CR.' Ha!" said Rabbit again. "I must tell the others." And he hurried off importantly. The nearest house was Owl's, and to Owl's house in the 100-acre wood he made his way. He came to Owl's door, and he knocked and he rang, and he rang and he knocked, and he rang and he rang and he knocked. And at last Owl's head came out and said, "Go away, I'm thinking, oh, it's you," which was how he always began. "Owl," said Rabbit shortly, "you and I have brains. The others have fluff. If there's any thinking to be done in this forest, and when I say thinking, I mean thinking, you and I must do it." "Yes," said Owl, "I was. Read that." Owl took Christopher Robin's notice from Rabbit and looked at it nervously. He could spell his own name, Owl, and he could spell Tuesday, so that you knew it wasn't Wednesday, and he could read quite comfortably when you weren't looking over his shoulder and saying "well" all the time. And he could... "Well?" said Rabbit. "Yes," said Owl, looking wise and thoughtful. "I see what you mean, undoubtedly." "Well, exactly," said Owl, "precisely." And he added after a little thought, "If you had not come to me, I should have come to you." "Why?" asked Rabbit. "For that very reason," said Owl, hoping that something helpful would happen soon. "Yesterday morning," said Rabbit solemnly, "I went to see Christopher Robin. He was out. Pinned on his door was a notice." "The same notice?" "A different one, but the meaning was the same. It's very odd." "Amazing," said Owl, looking at the notice again, and getting just for a moment a curious sort of feeling that something had happened to Christopher Robin's back. "What did you do?" "Nothing." "The best thing," said Owl wisely. "Well?" said Rabbit again, as Owl knew he was going to. "Exactly," said Owl. For a little while he couldn't think of anything more, and then all of a sudden he had an idea. "Tell me, Rabbit," he said, "the exact words of the first notice. This is very important. Everything depends on this. The exact words of the first notice." "It was just the same as that one, really." Owl looked at him and wondered whether to push him off the tree, but feeling that he'd always do it afterwards, he tried once more to find out what they were talking about. "The exact words, please," he said, as if Rabbit hadn't spoken. "It just said, 'Gone out, Baxon,' same as this, only this says, 'Busy Baxon,' too." Owl gave a great sigh of relief. "Ah," said Owl, "now we know where we are." "Yes, but where's Christopher Robin?" said Rabbit. "That's the point." Owl looked at the notice again. To one of his education, the reading of it was easy. "Gone out, Baxon, busy Baxon," just the sort of thing you'd expect to see on a notice. "It is quite clear what has happened, my dear Rabbit," he said. "Christopher Robin has gone out somewhere with Baxon. He and Baxon are busy together. Have you seen a Baxon anywhere about in the forest lately?" "I don't know," said Rabbit. "That's what I came to ask you. What are they like?" "Well," said Owl, "the spotted or herbaceous Baxon is just a... At least," he said, "it's very more of a... Of course," he said, "it depends on the... Well," said Owl, "the fact is," he said, "I don't know what they're like," said Owl frankly. "Thank you," said Rabbit, and he hurried off to see Pooh. Before he had gone very far, he heard a noise, so he stopped and listened. This was the noise. Noise by Pooh. "Oh, the butterflies are flying, now the winter days are dying, and the primroses are trying to be seen, and the turtle doves are cooing, and the woods are up and doing, for the violets are bluing in the green. Oh, the honeybees are gumming on their little wings and humming that the summer which is coming will be fun. And the cows are almost cooing and the turtle doves are mooing, which is why a poo is pooing in the sun. For the spring is very springing, you can see a skylark singing, and the bluebells which are ringing can be heard. And the cuckoo isn't cooing, but he's cooking, and he's ooing, and a poo is simply pooing, like a bird.
Hello, Pooh, said Rabbit.
Hello, Rabbit, said Pooh dreamily.
Did you make that song up?
Well, I sort of made it up, said Pooh. It isn't brain, he went on humbly, because you know why, Rabbit. But it comes to me sometimes.
Ah, said Rabbit,
Who never let things come to him, but always went and fetched them.
well, the point is,
Have you seen a spotted or herbaceous baxen in the forest at all? No, said Pooh. No, said Pooh. I saw Tigger just now.
that's no good.
No, said Pooh. I thought it wasn't.
Have you seen Piglet?
Yes, said Pooh. I suppose that isn't any good either, he asked meekly.
Well, it depends if he saw anything.
He saw me, said Pooh. Rabbit sat down on the ground next to Pooh, and feeling much less important like that, stood up again.
What it all comes to is this, he said. What does Christopher Robin do in the morning nowadays?
What sort of thing?
Well, can you tell me anything you've seen him do in the morning, these last few days?
Yes, said Pooh. We had breakfast together yesterday, by the pine trees. I'd made up a little basket, just a little fair-sized basket, an ordinary biggish sort of basket full of...
Yes, said Rabbit. But I mean later than that. Have you seen him between 11 and 12?
Well, said Pooh, at 11 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, well, at 11 o'clock, you see, I generally get home about then, because I have one or two things to do.
11:15, then.
Well, said Pooh.
1/2.
Yes, said Pooh, at 1/2, or perhaps later I might see him. And now that he did think of it, he began to remember that he hadn't seen Christopher Robin about so much lately. Not in the mornings. Afternoons, yes. Evenings, yes. Before breakfast, yes. Just after breakfast, yes. And then perhaps, see you again, Pooh, and off he'd go.
That's just it, said Rabbit. Where?
Perhaps he's looking for something.
What? Asked Rabbit.
That's just what I was going to say, said Pooh. And then he added, perhaps he's looking for
A spotted or herbaceous baxen?
Yes, said Pooh. One of those. In case it isn't. Rabbit looked at him severely.
I don't think you're helping, he said.
No, said Pooh. I do try, he added humbly. Rabbit thanked him for trying, and said that he would now go and see Eeyore, and Pooh could walk with him if he liked. But Pooh, who felt another verse of his song coming on him, said he would wait for Piglet. Goodbye, Rabbit. So Rabbit went off. But as it happened, it was Rabbit who saw Piglet first. Piglet had got up early that morning to pick himself a bunch of violets, and when he'd picked them and put them in a pot in the middle of his house, it suddenly came over him that nobody had ever picked Eeyore a bunch of violets. And the more he thought of this, the more he thought how sad it was to be an animal who had never had a bunch of violets picked for him. So he hurried out again, saying to himself, Eeyore violets, and violets Eeyore, in case he forgot, because it was that sort of day. And he picked a large bunch and trotted along, smelling them and feeling very happy, until he came to the place where Eeyore was. "Oh, Eeyore," began Piglet, a little nervously, because Eeyore was busy. Eeyore put out a hoof and waved him away. "Tomorrow," said Eeyore, "or the next day." Piglet came a little closer to see what it was. Eeyore had 3 sticks on the ground and was looking at them. 2 of the sticks were touching at one end, but not at the other, and the 3rd stick was laid across them. Piglet thought that perhaps it was a trap of some kind. "Oh, Eeyore," he began again. "Is that little Piglet?" said Eeyore, still looking hard at his sticks. "Yes, Eeyore, and do you know what this is?" "No," said Piglet. "It's an A." "Oh," said Piglet. "Not O, A," said Eeyore severely. "Can't you hear, or do you think you have more education than Christopher Robin?" "Yes," said Piglet. "No," said Piglet very quickly, and he came closer still. "Christopher Robin said it was an A, and an A it is, until somebody treads on it," Eeyore added sternly. Piglet jumped backwards hurriedly and smelt at his violets. "Do you know what A means, little Piglet?" "No, Eeyore, I don't." "It means learning. It means education. It means all the things that you and Pooh haven't got. That's what A means." Oh, said Piglet again. I mean, does it? He explained quickly. I'm telling you, people come and go in this forest and they say, it's only Eeyore, so it doesn't count. They walk to and fro saying, ha, ha. But do they know anything about A? They don't. It's just 3 sticks to them. But to the educated, not meaning Poohs and Piglets, it's a great and glorious A. Not, he added, just something that anybody can come and breathe on. Piglet stepped back nervously and looked round for help.
Oh, here's Rabbit, he said gladly. Hello, Rabbit.
Rabbit came up importantly, nodded to Piglet and said, ah, Eeyore, in the voice of one who would be saying goodbye in about 2 more minutes. And there's one thing I wanted to ask you, Eeyore. What happens to Christopher Robin in the mornings nowadays? What's this that I'm looking at? Said Eeyore, still looking at it.
3 sticks,
said Rabbit promptly. You see, said Eeyore to Piglet. I will now answer your question, Rabbit, he said solemnly.
Thank you, said Rabbit.
What does Christopher Robin do in the mornings? He learns. He becomes educated. He instigates. I think that is the word he mentioned, but I may be referring to something else. He instigates knowledge. In my small way, I also, if I have the word right, am doing what he does. That, for instance, is...
An A, said Rabbit, but not a very good one. Well, I must get back and tell the others.
Eeyore looked at his sticks, and then he looked at Piglet. What did Rabbit say it was? He asked.
An A, said Piglet.
Did you tell him?
No, Eeyore, I didn't. I expect he just knew.
He knew? You mean this A thing is a thing Rabbit knew?
Yes, Eeyore. He's clever, Rabbit is.
Clever? Said Eeyore scornfully, putting a foot heavily on his 3 sticks. Education? Said Eeyore bitterly, jumping on his 6 sticks. What is learning? Asked Eeyore, as he kicked his 12 sticks into the air. A thing Rabbit knows.
Ha! I think, began Piglet nervously.
Don't, said Eeyore.
I think violets are rather nice, said Piglet,
and he laid his bunch in front of Eeyore and scampered off. Next morning, the notice on Christopher Robin's door said, gone out, back soon, CR, which is why all the animals in the forest, except of course the spotted and herbaceous Baxon, now know what Christopher Robin does in the mornings. Christopher Robin was going away. Nobody knew why he was going. Nobody knew where he was going. Indeed, nobody even knew why he knew that Christopher Robin was going away. But somehow or other, everybody in the forest felt that it was happening at last. Even smallest of all, a friend and relation of Rabbit's, who thought he had once seen Christopher Robin's foot, but couldn't be quite sure because perhaps it was something else. Even S.O.A. told himself that things were going to be different. And late and early, 2 other friends and relations said well early and well late to each other in such a hopeless sort of way that it really didn't seem any good waiting for the answer. One day, when he felt that he couldn't wait any longer, Rabbit brained out a notice, and this is what it said. Notice! A meeting of everybody will meet at the house of Pooh Corner to pass a resolution, by order, keep the left, signed Rabbit. He had to write this out 2 or 3 times before he could get the resolution to look like what he thought it was going to when he began to spell it. But when at last it was finished, he took it round to everybody and read it out to them. And they all said they would come. Well, said Eeyore, that afternoon, when he saw them all walking up to his house, this is a surprise. Am I asked too? Don't mind Eeyore, whispered Rabbit to Pooh. I told him all about it this morning. Everybody said, how do you do, to Eeyore, and Eeyore said that he didn't, not to notice, and then they sat down. And as soon as they were all sitting down, Rabbit stood up again. We all know why we're here, he said. But I have asked my friend Eeyore. That's me, said Eeyore. Grand. I have asked him to propose a resolution. Now then, Eeyore, he said. Don't bustle me, said Eeyore, getting up slowly. Don't now then me. He took a piece of paper from behind his ear and unfolded it. Nobody knows anything about this, he went on. This is a surprise. He coughed in an important way, and began again. What nots and et ceteras. Before I begin, or perhaps I should say before I end, I have a piece of poetry to read to you. Hitherto, Hitherto a long word meaning, well, you'll see what it means directly. Hitherto, as I was saying, all the poetry in the forest has been written by Pooh, a bear with a pleasing manner and a positively startling lack of brain. The poem which I am now about to read to you was written by Eeyore or myself in a quiet moment. If somebody will take Roo's bullseye away from him and wake up Owl, we shall all be able to enjoy it. I call it poem. This was it. Christopher Robin is going, at least I think he is, where? Nobody knows, but he is going. I mean he goes, to rhyme with nose. Do we care? To rhyme with where. We do, very much. I haven't got a rhyme for that is in the second line yet. Bother. Now I haven't got a rhyme for bother. Bother. Those two bothers will have to rhyme with each other. Bother. The fact is, this is more difficult than I thought. I ought, very good indeed, I ought to begin again, but it is easier to stop. Christopher Robin, goodbye. Good, and all your friends sends, all your friend send, very awkward this, it keeps going wrong. Well, anyhow, we send our love end. If anybody wants to clap, said Eeyore when he had read this, now is the time to do it. They all clapped. Thank you, said Eeyore. Unexpected and gratifying, if a little lacking in smack. It's much better than mine, said Pooh admiringly, and he really thought it was. Well, explained Eeyore modestly, it was meant to be. The resolution, said Rabbit, is that we all sign it and take it to Christopher Robin. So it was signed. And they all went off to Christopher Robin's house with it. Hello, everybody, said Christopher Robin. Hello, Pooh. They all said hello and felt awkward and unhappy suddenly, because it was a sort of goodbye they were saying, and they didn't want to think about it. So they stood around and waited for somebody else to speak, and they nudged each other and said, go on, and gradually Eeyore was nudged to the front, and the others crowded behind him. What is it, Eeyore? Asked Christopher Robin. Eeyore swished his tail from side to side so as to encourage himself, and began. Christopher Robin, he said, we've come to say, to give you, it's called Written By, but we've all, because we've heard, I mean we all know, well, you see, it's, well, that to put it as shortly as possible is what it is. And he turned round angrily on the others and said, everybody crowds around so in this forest. There's no space. I never saw a more spreading lot of animals in my life. Can't you see that Christopher Robin wants to be alone? I'm going. And he humped off. Not quite knowing why, the others began edging away. And when Christopher Robin had finished reading poem and was looking up to say thank you, only Pooh was left. It's a comforting sort of thing to have, said Christopher Robin, folding up the paper and putting it in his pocket. Come on, Pooh. And he walked off quickly. Where are we going? Said Pooh, hurrying after him, and wondering whether it was to be an explore or a what shall I do about you-know-what. Nowhere, said Christopher Robin. So they began to go there. And after they had walked a little way, Christopher Robin said, what do you like doing best in the world, Pooh? Well, said Pooh, what I like best. And then he had to stop and think. Because although eating honey was a very good thing to do, there was a moment just before you began to eat it which was better than when you were. But he didn't know what it was called. And then he thought that being with Christopher Robin was a very good thing to do. And having Piglet near was a very friendly thing to have. And so when he had thought it all out, he said, what I like best in the whole world is me and Piglet going to see you, and you saying, what about a little something? And me saying, well, I shouldn't mind a little something, should you, Piglet? And it being a hummy sort of day outside, and birds singing. I like that too, said Christopher Robin. But what I like doing best is nothing. How do you do nothing? Asked Pooh, after he had wondered for a long time. Well, it's when people call out at you just as you are going off to do it. What are you going to do, Christopher Robin? And you say, oh, nothing. And then you go and do it. Oh, I see, said Pooh. This is a nothing sort of thing that we're doing now. Oh, I see, said Pooh again. It means just going along, listening to all the things you can't hear, and not bothering. Oh, said Pooh. They walked on, thinking of this and that, and by they came to an enchanted place on the very top of the forest, which is 60-something trees in a circle. And Christopher Robin knew that it was enchanted, because nobody had ever been able to count whether it was 63 or 64, not even when he tied a piece of string round each tree after he counted it. Being enchanted, the floor wasn't like the floor of the forest, gorse and bracken and heather, but close-set grass, quiet and smooth and green. It was the only place in the forest where you could sit down carelessly without getting up again almost at once and looking for somewhere else. Sitting there, they could see the whole world spread out until it reached the sky. And whatever there was, all the world over, was with them in Galleon's lap. Suddenly Christopher Robin began to tell Pooh about some of the things. People called kings and queens, and something called factors, and a place called Europe, and an island in the middle of the sea where no ships came, and how you make a suction pump, if you want to, and when knights were knighted, and what comes from Brazil. And Pooh, his back against one of the 60-something trees, and his paws folded in front of him, said, oh, and I don't know, and thought how wonderful it would be to have a real brain which could tell you things. And by Christopher Robin came to an end of the things and was silent, and he sat there looking out over the world and wishing it wouldn't stop. But Pooh was thinking too, and he said suddenly to Christopher Robin, is it a very grand thing to be an afternoon, what you said? A what? Said Christopher Robin lazily, as he listened to something else. On a horse, explained Pooh. A knight. Oh, was that it? Said Pooh. I thought it was a... Is it as grand as a king and factors and all the other things you said? Well, it's not as grand as a king, said Christopher Robin. And then, as Pooh seemed disappointed, he added quickly, but it's grander than factors. Could a bear be one? Of course he could, said Christopher Robin. I'll make you one. And he took a stick and touched Pooh on the shoulder and said, rise, Sir Pooh the bear, most faithful of all my knights. So Pooh rose and sat down and said thank you, which is the proper thing to say when you've been made a knight, and he went into a dream again, in which he and Sir Pump and Sir Brazil and Factors lived together with a horse and were faithful knights, all except Factors, who looked after the horse, to good King Christopher Robin. And every now and then he shook his head and said to himself, I'm not getting it right. Then he began to think of all the things Christopher Robin would want to tell him when he came back from wherever he was going to, and how muddling it would be for a bear of very little brain to try and get them right in his mind. So perhaps, he said sadly to himself, Christopher Robin won't tell me any more. And he wondered if being a faithful knight meant that you just went on being faithful without being told things. Then suddenly again, Christopher Robin, who was still looking at the world with his chin in his hands, called out, Pooh? Yes, said Pooh. Pooh? Yes, Christopher Robin? I'm not going to do nothing any more. Never again? Well, not so much. They don't let you. Pooh waited for him to go on, but he was silent again. Yes, Christopher Robin, said Pooh helpfully. Pooh, when I'm not doing nothing, will you come up here sometimes? Just me? Yes, Pooh. Will you be here too? Yes, Pooh, I will be, really. I promise I will be, Pooh. That's good, said Pooh. Pooh, promise you won't forget about me, ever? Not even when I'm 100? Pooh thought a little. How old shall I be then? 99. Pooh nodded. I promise, he said. Still with his eyes on the world, Christopher Robin put out a hand and felt for Pooh's paw. Pooh, said Christopher Robin earnestly, if I'm not quite... He stopped and tried again. Pooh, whatever happens, you will understand, won't you? Understand what? Oh, nothing. He laughed and jumped to his feet. "Come on." "Where?" said Pooh. "Anywhere," said Christopher Robin. So they went off together. But wherever they go, and whatever happens to them on the way, in that enchanted place on the top of the forest, a little boy and his bear will always be playing. I'm off to anywhere now too, so farewell.